Hi everybody, welcome to my studio and welcome to my channel. Today is our second session for our first ever piano summer camp. And last week we had 4 students perform and we talked about practice strategies. So today we will have 4 more students perform for us, and the topic for discussion today is how to read music notes correctly and efficiently. In other words, quickly, quickly and accurately. All right. So obviously, for the seasoned pianists out there, this will be something that you already know. But we do have a lot of young students in the studio, so I want to make a point of really going over how to go about reading notes on the staff, so that obviously that will help them to learn their pieces, and also when it comes time for exam, they will have no problem doing the sight reading portion. Okay, so our first performer today is going to be little Savannah. I'm gonna highlight her video for you all. And look at how pretty she is today. Hi, gorgeous. All right, so do you want to tell us about yourself, Savannah?
Hi, my name is Savannah Fleck, and I'm 5 years old, and I'm going to Treble Clef.
Oh, how sweet, right? All right, so all yours. Thank you so much, Savannah. Wow, how sweet. And I love your smile. I love everything, right? It's memorized. You know, this is, I think, a universal song, isn't it? Everybody knows it, no matter where you're from, right? I think everybody knows this. So you did a great job, right? I love how you did the repeat for me, that octave higher, right? And the thing I loved the most, right, apart from how accurate it was, is that you remember what I said about lifting, right, the hand when you are done with it. And that way, right, you can use your wrist, right, and it looked just like how I tell you to do. Okay, so congratulations. You did an awesome job. All right, so Savannah, we are talking about how to read notes on the piano, right? Or on the staff today. Do you want to tell us how you could find where the notes are? So when you were looking at the music for this piece, right? How did you go about it?
I found the notes in toilet.
Uh-huh. Well, what helped you? Were you looking for this particular piece? Were you looking at white notes, or were you focusing on the black notes?
Black note.
Obviously, right? So Savannah is a beginner, right? So to help her get around the keyboard, right? Obviously, we were focusing on the groups of black notes, right? So sometimes they're grouped in what? How many? Like, look at your piano. Sometimes how many black notes are there in a group?
3 and 2.
Very good, right? So that's the first step, right? The first step in really learning how to play the piano is to recognize that the black notes are grouped, right, into different numbers. So sometimes there's 2 of them, and sometimes there's 3 of them, right? And she absolutely knows that, right? So that's how she could find her notes and be able to find them. So the 2 black notes, right? I'm using the little erasers I have. And then after that, you've got 3 in a group, right? And they just alternate. Okay, so once you know that, it will help you find where you are, right? And they repeat, right? So 2s and then 3s and then 2s. And Savannah has these erasers too, right? Do you remember I gave them to you? right? So at first, that's kind of how we start, is to know that they're grouped into this pattern, 2 3s, 2 3s, 2 3s. Okay, all right. So after that, right? Of course, Savannah, what note do we try to find? So we use the 2 black notes, right, as a reference, and that will help us find what note. You want to tell me what that note is that I'm playing?
C.
Good job. And what else do we call it? Like
Do.
when we sing, we sing do, right? Well done, Savannah, right? Now, this is like an interview, isn't it? You did not expect us to do this part. So, and I don't think I talked about the format very much with you yet. So you're doing a great job, okay? You're doing a great job answering the questions and responding, right, to what I'm asking you. Okay, so you are done, all right? Let me see Zachary now. And then we'll highlight Zachary's video. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself, Zachary.
My name, I'm 8 years old.
Uh-huh.
Hi, my name is Zachary Smith. I'm 8 years old. And today I'm going to be playing Morning Greeting by Cornelius Gurley.
Thank you. Thank you, Zachary. Very good job, right? You are very polished, right? You, the whole package. Dynamics, especially, I really noticed them, right? They were so interesting to listen to. And of course, just like your sister, you really worked hard on the flexibility of your arm, right? And showing me those rests and not have the hand stay on the keys, right? Really doing the rest justice, as I call it. Okay, so great job. All right, so, well, you definitely have been playing the piano much longer than Savannah has, right? So you know a lot about note reading for sure. She's just starting to kind of figure out what note goes with what on the page. But at first, it's just looking at the keyboard, right? And finding what we call the geography of the keyboard and making sure that she's familiar with the groupings. But you, of course, are way more advanced than that. All right, so tell us, Zachary, how do you go about reading a note? Like, and finding out where it is on the piano? Like when you see a piece of music, yep.
What I do first is I look at where it is. Is it high? Is it low? Is it in the middle? Is it really low? Is it really high? I look at like where it is, and then I say, what's the closest C to that note? And then you count from that C, and then you can find the note.
Wow, what a perfect answer, right? Now, were you always doing it that way though, before?
No.
And then, so what happened when you weren't doing it that way?
When I wasn't doing it that way, it was a lot harder to find the notes.
And it would be more like a sort of like a random thing, right? Like sometimes you'll be lucky you would find it, and sometimes you wouldn't be so lucky, right? All right, so let's look at the keyboard and let me go over in more detail, right, as to what you were talking about. I absolutely understand what you were saying because that's how I tell you to do it, right? But I think when you first learn how to play the piano, you weren't reading it that way. So, it took you a while to be adjusted. But anyway, now you get it, okay? So what Zachary is telling us is that we need to, first of all, divide the piano, right, keyboard into different registers. So the word we use is register. So Unfortunately, I couldn't get this camera to cover all the notes on the piano, but hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. So this, of course, is middle register. That's the middle C. So with Savannah, we were saying if you find the two black notes, right, and you put your two long fingers right there, this is, of course, the C note, right, or Do. So this is called the middle register, and that's usually where the name of the piano is. So every piano has a name, right? The brand that makes the piano. So middle register, high register, very high register, or higher register, I should say, and very high register. Okay, so middle and low, lower, very low. Right? So the first decision is decide what register you're talking about. You don't even need to decide what note it is, but what register, okay? So that's where the piano keyboard is. Now then, of course, it only makes sense if we're actually talking about music, right? So on the paper, my line is not very straight today. I'm gonna try harder. So 5 lines, right? That's our staff. And of course, for piano music, that's not usually all we see. We will usually see another set of 5 lines at the bottom. So a regular, oopsie, my treble clef again. Excuse the whiteboard. A regular piano score will look like this, right? So you'll have the treble clef, the bass clef, and then it'll be joined together, and that's called the grand staff, right? Okay, so here is the thing. If it doesn't specify, right, otherwise, then the top is normally played by the right hand. Could be an exception, but if there's nothing special about it and it doesn't say otherwise, then that's right hand and that's left hand. And this is the thing. It doesn't have to be treble clef and bass clef like this. It could be different, right? But this is what we normally see, especially for beginners. So we'll use this to start with. So treble clef means the notes are relatively high, and that's what the word treble means anyway. And bass clef means the notes are relatively low, and that's what the word bass means anyway. It means low. So Zachary was telling us to use the C, and he's absolutely right. That's how we go about it. Middle C doesn't use the existing 5 lines, it uses its own line. And it's right in the middle between treble and bass. So that's very logical, right? So there's our middle area, and there's our middle C. Easy to identify because it has its own line. But in an actual piece of music, you'll never see middle C written right in the middle like this. You'll usually see it written sort of closer to the top or closer to the bottom. And that simply tells you which hand to use. So if it's closer to the top, you're going to use your right hand to play that middle C. And if it's closer to the bottom, you're going to use the left hand to play that middle C. And then you use that as your landmark, okay? So I don't use any other landmarks like G's and F's. I only use C. Because if you use other landmarks, then you're going to get confused. Is the G landmark supposed to be treble clef, or is it for the bass clef? So only use C as your landmark. And then all you do after that is you count line, space, line, space, line, space, line, space, in that order, right? Or space, line, space, line. So it must alternate. So C is a line, so the next one has to be a space. The next one has to be a line, the next one has to be a space. They have to alternate. And then you just simply go up the music alphabet, C, D, E, F, G. And of course, we all know after G, we go back to letter A and then B, right? And then that's it. There's no more alphabet, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we simply start over again from C. Then if we were to sing it, which I tell all my students to do, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, right? After Ti, we go back to Do again, right? So then to be the high C. So if you know where the C is, you can simply count to find other notes. But once the note starts to be high, we no longer use the C to help us. We use the high C. So if you kept going earlier, high C would have been here. So that's our next landmark note. So the landmark note is always C, right? So this is your high C. And once you have taken the trouble to find it for the first time, by counting line, space, line, space, line, space, line, space. I then basically want you to just print that note in your mind. Engrave it in your mind so you never lose it. It's kind of like recognizing what your mom looks like. I always say C's are like your family. Once you have met them, you don't want to forget them again, ever. So this is what high C is. And you just have to memorize it, that it is a space note, not the highest space on the top, this one, okay? The one below it. Or if you want to count from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, third space. And that's the high C. Okay, so if you have a note that's on the high area, for example, this note, you don't go from the middle C to help you get there. You go C, D, E, F. Okay, but the first decision is to know that you were using the high C to help you find it. So the register now is high, not middle. Okay, and that is, of course, one of the most common mistakes a lot of students make, is they could very quickly somehow, using whatever previous method they used, they could know that this was an F. But when it comes time to actually play it on the piano, they play the wrong F, right? They either play an F that's too high or an F that's too low. In other words, they weren't thinking about register first. So basically the point is, must find out the register first before you even figure out the letter. Okay, so decide if the note is in the middle register, high register, low register, higher register, lower register, or whatever register it is, before you go ahead and find the letter. Okay, so this note being high, we are in the high register, so use the high C to help you. Okay, so then we know it's F. All right, so if we take that out, right, the next C to know, of course, Zachary, do you want to tell us? After we know this new landmark, which is the high C, what is the other landmark?
Low C.
Exactly, right? So low C is right here. I'm sure you know that, right? And that's why I use C, because C has such a special quality about it that it's symmetrical. The high C and the low C are basically mirror images of each other. So if you know where high C is, you flip it over, here's your low C. So it's space number 2. It's also a space note. Only C's have that unique quality. They can be flipped over. They are exact mirror image of each other. Okay, so again, so even though it is down here, then we know it is in the low register, so we use the low C to help us. So if I were to draw, say, this note, or if you were to see this note, how do you know where it is? Well, the first decision you make is that it's low, right? It's not in the middle register, it's not in the high register, it's in the low register. So you use low C to help you. So you go, this is low C, go down, bingo. I found it, it's A, right? Do it this way. Otherwise, you'll run into the same problem as what I was saying. A lot of students go, oh, I know this is A, using whatever previous method they had learned, and then they go, okay, it's A, and then they just go and hit whatever A they feel like, or they happen to be more familiar with, and they just play the wrong A, unfortunately. Okay, so knowing the register, okay, is very important. All right, Zachary, before we go to the next performer, do you want to tell us where the other 2 C's are that are also so important?
There are higher C, which also has its own line. It's 2 lines above.
Yeah, right here, right? Good.
And then, just like you were saying, the bass clef is the exact mirror image.
So it's down here, right?
Below.
Very good, right? So right here, so we have 2 lines there. Very good, right? So 2 lines outside, 2 lines outside treble, and 2 lines outside bass. So that's the higher one, that's the lower one, right? So if a note is like somewhere here, right, you're not gonna use this C to help you or that C to help you. The first decision is it is higher. So you're gonna use this C. So 2 lines, you go C, D, E, and there you go, right? You can find it. Okay, so thank you, Zachary, for everything that you've told us about how to read notes. That was very good that you remember the strategy that I've been telling you, right? Okay, thank you. So now we are going to go to our next performer, and it is Joaquin. Would you like to tell us about yourself, Joaquin?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Joaquin. I am 8 years old, and I am going to play. Minuet and Rondell by Jean-Philippe Rameau.
Thank you. All yours. Thank you. Okay, well, I think the reception was not so good, at least on my end. So when you were playing, I was hearing a little bit of static sound. I don't know if other people heard it too. And also, your video didn't kind of synchronize with your audio. But I did hear very clearly how you played, so the actual playing was very good, right? Especially your ornaments, they were very, very, very well executed. Okay, so good job on the performance. Okay, it's one of these things that we cannot control when we go live. Sometimes the connection, right, the internet connection is just not quite as good as we would like, and it is out of our control. But anyway, you did a great job, okay, in terms of the playing. Okay, so Joaquin, going back to what we were saying about how to help us find notes, right? Can you tell us what are some of the common mistakes people make? And you probably have made them yourself too, and others people too. So tell us what are some of the common mistakes people can make when they are trying to find what the note is. So Savannah, when she played, we were talking about, first of all, using the black keys, right, and realizing the grouping of the black keys. That's a start. And then Zachary told us about finding registers. So we first decide, right, whereabouts the note should be, middle, high, low, higher, lower, right? What are some other things that people should watch out for so that they can read accurately?
Maybe because like on the right hand, there's this piece where you didn't see the part where the high key is actually like the bass clef, like the low left hand, like the low as the left hand. Cause like you forgot to see it and like on the thing, and then you just did the note, but it was you needed to put it in the bass clef.
All right. Well, I think if I understand you correctly, I think you're trying to tell us that, just like I said earlier, things don't have to look this way, right? So this is the regular, right, normal piano score, but right hand doesn't have to be treble clef. Is that what you're saying? Right, like some pieces, the right hand could absolutely be the bass clef. So in that case, right, you have to be very careful. So if I get rid of all of this, then we can, well, I almost should have just started over. Oh, here we go, right? So the right hand could be bass clef to begin with, right? And that's what confuses a lot of people. Like, what do I do if the top clef is bass clef, right? And usually, right, I'm not saying always, usually if the right hand is bass clef, the left hand is probably also bass clef. So all that is telling us is that both hands are gonna play low notes. That's it. Okay, they are all gonna be low notes, but this is still gonna be played by the right hand, and this is still gonna be played by the left hand. So then how do you go about finding the note? Well, same strategy. Remember, middle C was between treble and bass. So middle C was below treble clef but above bass clef, so it is no different. So middle C is still gonna be here, okay, above the bass clef. Middle C is still gonna be here. It's not gonna change. Middle C always has its own line above the bass clef. Low C is still gonna be here. Low C is still gonna be there. So you still use your C to help you find your note. So if you have a note that looks like this, what will you play? Well, you go middle C is here, so it's lower than middle C. Or you can go low C is here, so it's higher than low C. So Joaquin, just to show us you understand, and I'm sure you do, but let's show everybody. So where would this note be that I'm drawing right now with the big red filled in circle? Play on your piano. Play on your piano so we could all see where that note is gonna be.
Okay.
Hopefully you remember what I drew. Did you see it? Should I show you again? Thank you so much, right? Oh, but let me just stop the video. So remember this was on the top, okay? Did you use your right hand to play? Let's look at your camera again. Can you play that note again? Show me again. Okay, your audio, your video. Yes, good. So you are using the right hand to play that note. Okay, good. Okay, so see, that's a very common mistake. So thank you for telling us about that. So it doesn't mean you're gonna use the left hand because it's still on the top. So what's the left hand gonna play? Well, who knows, right? Depends on the music. The left hand could play a lower note. So if I drew the left hand here, right? A note here on the very, very bottom line, right? So now hopefully you remember these two notes that I just drew. Can you play the left hand, this note, and right hand this note to show us where they are? Go. Good. Okay, so your video is a couple seconds behind. Thank you. So that is exactly right, right? Now, of course, then we could have the opposite problem where both hands are treble clef. Right? That definitely can happen. Do we agree? So if that happens, that's another thing that can trick a lot of people. Then they go, what do I do, right? If they both are treble clef. So, well, we are used to seeing right hand with treble clef, so that's not a big deal. But what if the left hand is also treble clef? Well, again, that just means everybody's going to play a high note. So right hand, treble clef, middle C is here. Left hand, still treble clef, so middle C is here too. So they are just the same, right? And then, of course, your high C will be here. So before you even decide what the note is, this is what you think about. Where are all my potential C's in the treble clef? And this is where they are, right? 2 lines outside is the higher C. So immediately in your mind, these are the C's you should be thinking of. So then if you see a note, of course, we're gonna have Joaquin demonstrate again, right? Suppose I have a note that's like here. What do you play, Joaquin? This note right here. Okay? Show us. Well done, right? Very good. And that's another common mistake, right? People look at one line, they go, oh, one line is C. I know that, right? They're thinking about this C because it has one line. But of course, that would not be right because this one line is outside of the treble clef. So it cannot be C. It's only C if it's below the treble clef. Remember, middle C is between treble and bass. That's why it's called middle. So it has to be below the treble clef. So middle is below high, right? So this is not C whatsoever. In order to be C and it's outside the treble clef, you need 2 lines, right? So I'm glad that Joaquin found no for us. It's, of course, A, okay? And then another thing that could, of course, confuse people is sometimes, for whatever reason, left hand is gonna play a higher note than the right hand. Could that happen? Absolutely. So demonstrate for us, Joaquin, what this note would be if I draw the left hand here, right? Now remember, left hand is in the treble clef. So if I have a left hand note that looks like this, 1, 2, 3 lines outside, and the right hand is the A that you showed us, show us on the piano what that would look like if they were to be played at the same time. Go. So remember, the right hand was the A you played, and the left hand is what? Did you see the whiteboard? I'll show you again. This is right hand. You already played that note for me. This is left hand. You haven't played this note for me, but I want you to show us what it would look like if they are to be played at the same time. It's unusual, but what would you do? Show me.
So if I would do
Put the
that,
right hand first. Remember, you already found the right hand. So put the right hand on that note that you had found. Play it. Okay, and then remember what the left hand was? I drew 3 lines outside the treble clef. So what would it be? So play them both. That's fine. As unusual as it is, that is how you do it. Now you were almost going to cross over the wrong hand, right? So be careful. So right hand, left hand. It's more common to go over, not under, right? I almost saw you trying to go under, okay? So Joaquin, you're getting better, right? It still is confusing you a little bit when things unusual like that happens. You still sort of get a little bit confused, right? But that's all right. You're young, right? But at least you're starting to be careful or more careful about how to go about finding the note using the method that Zachary just told us, right? Because I tell everybody the same method, okay? That is the method, okay? Is thinking about register, using the nearest C to help us, not using some, I don't even know what those sentences are, but some people do learn how to find the notes by using some made up sentence, right? I think the only one that I could possibly remember is the one that is using the space note. I think most people know that one. It's called FACE, F-A-C-E. So they somehow learn that, right? And then they use that to help them find the note. I do not recommend that method at all, okay? Because the problem is, again, they identify the letter, but they don't know where it is on the piano, and they play the wrong one. Okay, all right. We need to go to our next performer, and it is Amy. Good job, Joaquin. So Amy, tell us what you're gonna do and how old you are.
well, my name is Amy. I am 11 years old, and I'm going to play the song. It's called Sonatina OP 20 number 1.
All right.
Wait, I think it's actually like the it's actually number 2. I'm sorry, and it's
Okay.
like third movement.
Thank you. That's all right. Thank you, Amy. That's a very long piece, right? So good job. Good job. The memory was pretty secure, right? Towards the end, you had a couple weird notes in the left hand. Do you agree? Some of the chords, I think right here. Right? Some of those notes were not quite correct, but you didn't let it bother you, right? Too much. You kept the music going just like you should, right? You got to the end. So as a performance, it was fine. So well done. All right, so going back to our note reading thing, right? So what else should people be aware of? So we've covered, a couple very important points. So do you think there's any other thing people should watch out for that you want to add? Like when you look at a piece of music. I'm especially looking at the score, right? And this is something we sort of mentioned to the same extent. We were saying, see, both hands can be treble clef, right? And your piece definitely has that. So they're both playing relatively high notes. So, and then of course the opposite can be true, and we covered that earlier, where both hands are in the bass clef, right? So right hand is in the bass clef and left hand is in the bass clef. So your music has everything we just talked about, right? It has the regular, normal right hand treble clef, left hand bass clef. It had both hands treble clef. It also had both hands bass clef, right? And also, just so the viewer knows what piece you're playing, this is by Kulau, right? It's Opus 20. OP means opus. That's the word, right? OPUS. Opus 20, number 3, by Frederick Kulau, and she played the third movement, Allegro, right? Polacca, this one right here. Okay, so this particular movement, right? I think the challenge is, of course, paying attention to the clef, right? It constantly changes. Do you see? So you can never take it for granted if the right hand is going to stay in the treble clef or if the left hand is going to stay in the bass clef. Because you see, it changes, goes back and forth a gazillion times, right? And of course, if you're my student, you know whenever I say the word gazillion or 500, that means a lot, right? So it changes, right? So you never ever can take it for granted. You must always double check, right? What clef you're dealing with. So once you decide on the clef, you think about the register again and then use the C. All right, so changing, right, is very important. Okay, well, we are almost out of time, so I want to go over just a few more things. Nobody has touched on the accidentals yet, right? So when we see an accidental, of course, Amy, tell us what we are supposed to do. Like, first of all, what's an accidental?
An accidental is like a sharp or a flat.
So if you see that, what are you going to do?
Well, if it is sharp, which is like this,
Yep, the
you basically
thing.
go from, like, for example, if it was D, you would go like half step higher.
Very good explanation, yep.
And it flat, which looks like a B, then you would go a half step lower.
Good job. That's a great explanation, right? So of course, if the music already has a sharp written or a flat written right beside the note, we are all gonna remember it, right? So what is the biggest problem with accidentals? It's not the one that's already there. What is it?
Well, sometimes like in the piece,
yep,
it would have like, for example, in this like in the very start, it would, like in the clef area, it would show like flat or a sharp on a certain note. It can be more than one of them, and it means that and all the time it would always be like sharp or flat.
Okay, so you're talking about the key signature now. Yes, you're right? So if it's a key signature, then it will be in the very beginning of the music, right? Instead of just next to the note we're talking about. So your music, right, at first had one flat in the key signature. So we know B is always gonna be a flat, right? So that's called the key signature. So then it won't always remind you, right? When the B comes, you're supposed to remind yourself that every time you have B, you better play flat. And then of course it became more complicated. There are 4 flats, right? Halfway through the piece. So now 4 notes are gonna become flats. So good, those, right? Or they don't know that the key signature could change. And of course, your music is a good example of that. So what I was saying about accidental was, so these are called accidentals. Accidentals are the ones that for some reason you only see right next to the note. So it's not in the front, right? So here the accidental is E natural. Why? Because they no longer want you to play E flat, even though it was specified in the key signature. So now E is becoming a natural. So what is the biggest problem about accidentals that people forget to do? Can you tell us, Amy? Like, for example, this is an E natural, right? Maybe people will see it and they will play E natural. But then what happens afterwards?
Another E would come in like the same measure, and it would turn natural again.
Exactly. So when another E comes later in the measure, they no longer will tell you what to do, but you are just supposed to remember that it was already natural, right? So you continue to do the natural, not the flat that was in the key signature. So in other words, the rule is that accidentals will last for the entire what? Measure, right? Once you see it, right, you then have to remember it for the rest of that measure, okay, until that measure is over. Then that accidental is bye-bye forever until if you ever see it again. So the fact that accidentals must continue to last is what a lot of people forget. Even very advanced players, right? They see the accidental, they do it, and then the next note comes later in that measure, I mean the same note, because the measure could be quite long, right? Because in the advanced music, there could be a lot of notes inside one measure. It's so hard to remember that accidental is still gonna be there, okay? So what are some of the things we can do or students can do so they don't forget their accidentals? Tell us.
Well, we can actually draw the accidentals on those notes.
That's the answer I want to hear. Good job. So you are a good student. You know exactly what we do in the lesson. We draw it. So in other words, always, if you don't have one, better get one now. Put a pencil next to your piano, right? So especially when you're learning a new piece of music, once you see an accidental, do not think that for some magic reason you're going to remember it. Maybe you will, but only after a long time. At first, just take the trouble to draw that accidental into the music if the note comes back again. Okay, so helping us by drawing it into the music is a very important tool. All right, so we covered accidentals. Okay, well, I just want to go over a couple more things and we are done for today, okay? So another thing that of course can change what the note is going to be is what I call extra markings. Now, what are extra markings? Like octave sign, right? So of course we know if you see the octave sign, what are we gonna do? You can tell us, Amy, because it's your turn.
One register higher.
Well, the octave sign tells us to change the note either an octave higher or an octave lower. And that confuses people sometimes, right? So basically, if the octave sign is written above the note, you make it octave higher. But if I draw the octave sign below the note, then what do? So this is called below. I make it an octave what? Lower. Okay? And usually it only applies to the note that the octave sign is closest to. So if the octave sign is here, right, then it applies to this note, or to all the notes in the right hand, I should say, right? But sometimes the composer will want you to do octave higher for both hands, or octave lower for both hands. Then they will specify both hands. So if you see the word both hands, then you do both hands, right? Otherwise, it's usually just one hand. Okay, and so that's another thing that can change, you know, where the note is going to be. What else? Well, unusual markings, right? Like for some reason, sometimes even though treble clef, which is on the top, usually it's played by the right hand. If for whatever reason the composer puts LH down, right? Then of course it doesn't matter that it is on the treble clef and that is on the top of the grand staff. You are gonna play the left hand, right, with that note. So that's called special instruction. So if that happens, then you have to make sure you do it, right? Okay, so only one thing that I've written down that we haven't gone over, right, is sight reading. So sometimes we have to read a piece of music in a pinch. We haven't had time to really figure it out, and we definitely haven't had time to write all our accidentals down, but we are just having to play it anyways, right? Like in the test, you have to do sight reading. So Amy, tell us some of the things people need to watch out for when they sight read.
Well,
everything we've talked about, we try to do, right? But what else?
Like sometimes I make mistakes when I accidentally play the very fast notes too slow and the slow notes too fast. And sometimes we would play the long notes too short and the short notes too long.
Okay, in other words, rhythm, right? Once you obviously figure out the note, the rhythm of the note, right? How long the note is terribly important. That's a very good tip, right? So don't just try to play the note as you see it, but think about the value of the notes, right? And not just making them like all the same, or play the easy notes fast and the hard notes slow, right? So think a little bit about rhythm. That's a very good strategy. Here, I'm going to find a piece and use that as an example. I'm trying to find a note that's like a little bit harder to find, but you are having to read it in a pinch. So what should you do? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to find a piece that would have a note. Okay, well, anyways, maybe I'll just draw it. So if very, very quickly you're having to find a note in a pinch, right? So you haven't had a lot of time to figure it out. And I'm gonna use the bass clef, right? Because usually that's the one people have more trouble reading, right? Treble clef, usually most people are okay. But let's just say we have a bass clef, right? And you're trying to find a random note in a pinch. Like this is called a random note in the bass clef, right? And I'll give you a hint. If the title says nocturne or whatever in E minor, okay? So that's your big clue. Nocturne in E minor, and you have to find this note very quickly. What would you do?
Well,
you probably know what it is, right? But if you didn't, what would you do? Can you see what I'm trying to get at?
these notes on the very last measure. And then because it's the E minor, then it would probably be E.
That's what I wanted you to tell me. Thank you, right? It's called an educated guess. So even though we do not ever want to be guessing, right, what the note is, if we are ever sight reading and we only have a split of a second to go find the note, rather than go, oh my goodness, there are so many lines here, where's my nearest C, and then I gotta count, we just have to take an educated guess, right? So most likely that's an E, especially if it's the end of the piece. I was trying to find a piece that has that note, but I couldn't find it quickly enough. So thank you, Amy. That's basically what I wanted you to tell me. So in other words, if you absolutely have to guess what a particular note is, do an educated guess, right? By using the name of the piece, the title, right? Or figuring out the key of the piece that you are in, so that if the note is at the very end of the piece, right, most likely it will be the tonic, which is in this case E. Okay, well, again, we are always over time, right? But I do appreciate all of your patience, and if anybody's watching, thank you for watching and joining us, and we will see you next week. Good job, everybody. Bye bye now.
Bye.
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 Bye, Li Yong.